Okay, so this is going to be office hours for the first assignment, and it's for healthcare project analysis. We're going to talk a little bit about the assignment and for the kind of how things are going. Hang on a second. Okay, so with that, make sure, can everybody see the opening slide here, the office hours slide? Make sure your video or your screen's working as well. Okay, I've got one person who does not have audio. For some reason, I don't know why. Anybody else with no audio? I guess if I ask you that, you won't be able to hear me, will you? Huh. Okay. Let's see. Hang on one second. Yeah. So anyway, let me try to get her started out really quickly, and then we'll get going. Make sure that you have your assignment in front of you. We're going to talk about that first, and then we're going to talk about a couple other things for course 4. So give me one quick second here. Okay, cool. So assignment number 1. Let's see. Let me get that up for you guys so you can see what we're doing. One moment. Okay, here. So you guys should be able to see homework 1 here. Actually, we don't need to look at the other slide. Everybody knows what that looks like. Just a second. Okay, here we go. So homework number 1 should be a pretty basic assignment for you guys, okay? So what we're looking at for homework number 1, the biggest thing to pay attention to, the biggest thing that people kind of screw up in this assignment, right, is it is a presentation. I know in course 3 we did not do any presentations. So now I am asking you to go all the way back to courses 1 and 2 when we did presentations and do another one just to see if you guys remember how to do all the cool things that we talked about. So with that, you're going to do a presentation, okay? I will need to see your note pages. So if you guys don't remember how to do notes pages, we'll walk through that. I will type out a kind of like a step-by-step for you so that you can have that. Please, please, please make sure that you are turning your notes pages into a PDF, not just the slides, because slides are gorgeous, but I also need to see the notes. Remember, that's one of the key pieces when we're putting together these presentations. We need to make sure that if for some reason you have to call in sick, presentation needs to go on, whoever gives the presentation not only can say what you are intending, right, but also has all of that background data that they need and background information that they need to answer questions from the audience, okay? Or also if you need to send it on to somebody else, okay? You guys need to make sure that you've got those notes in there. It will also help you if you have to give a presentation, kind of going back to it at a later date, if you've got those in there, okay? Because then you remember, oh, hey, this is what where I was going with this, etc., etc. So does that make sense? So please, 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 presentation, that means a PowerPoint, okay? Not a Word document. Still needs to be PDF though. So like I said, we'll do that in just a second. So what you are going to do is you need to go back to your case study briefing that we did in homework number 3 in the last course. So course 3, homework 3. Refer to that. It will make your life so much easier. Reuse the data mining that you did in course 3. Now, for some of you, it will have been, you just finished the last course, or course 3, so it should be pretty easy to find. For some of you, I know it's been a little while, so you want to make sure that you can find the information again. So again, if you did a good job with your case study and in writing that briefing document, this assignment should really be pretty easy to put together, okay? So that is why I know some people kind of hemmed and hawed, not sure why should we do that, case study document. That's fine. But in stuff like this, you need to have kind of a standard way of keeping track of what you did so that when somebody comes back a few months later, a few weeks later and says, hey, can you put together, I really liked what you did. Can you put together a presentation for me? Because I really want to have you show this to another team, another group. Okay, so in your presentation, so go ahead and reuse this information. You should be reusing it. Whenever I say refer to case study briefing, something from course 3, go ahead and reuse it. That's the whole idea behind data mining, right? Is that you're able to put together something that can be useful in multiple situations from multiple angles. This is a case in point. We're going to be doing that again in a few more assignments in course 4 here. So kind of keep that in mind. Okay, so we're doing the presentation. In your presentation, you need to have, again, what is your project question? What is the problem? What is the situation? Okay, so you need to have an idea telling me what is the question or problem, and then what is your recommended approach? So I've had people ask me, what do you mean by approach? Like what's an approach? So think about all the different ways that we have learned in the last 3 courses to put together different ways of tackling a situation, tackling a question, addressing a problem, things like that. So if you think back to course 1, right, we talked about experiments. We talked about different kinds of surveys, right, qualitative and quantitative surveys. We talked about small tests of change. We've talked about the Bayes rule, things like that. Okay, in course 2, we talked about looking at analyzing processes, correct? So we did looking at analyzing, time and motion study. We've got the 5 whys. We've got the fishbone. We've got looking at the first in, first out. Looking at your prioritization schemes. So are you going to do an improvement project approach? Are you looking at a compare? In course 3, we talked about improvement projects. We talked about doing comparisons in different ways, right? Looking at epidemiological comparisons within the VA, comparisons to the community, comparisons to different levels of the VA, different levels of the community. I know some of you actually went and used CDC data, some of you used census data. All of those things can kind of go into that approach. So tell me, or the general audience, what is your recommended kind of a basic approach? What do you think we should do about this? So here is the problem, the question or the problem, right? Okay, and then the project approach is kind of, okay, here's what I think we should do about this. We should do an experiment. We should do a small test of change. We should do a comparison to other locations that are very similar to ours. So that's what we should do. Okay, so tell me what you're going to do about it. Just on a super basic level. I'm not looking for, a 12-slide step-by-step approach. Just in general, what do you think we should do about it? Okay, give me some background around why this problem, this situation, this question is important. Why is it important to you? Why should we be looking at this? Why should the VA take this under advisement to do a project on it, to improve the situation, to compare the situation? Why should we do this? Okay, always think of the background as kind of like that, so what? So here's your project in question. Here's what I think we should do about it. Okay, so what? Why should we care about it? To be really blunt, and I mean, in healthcare, obviously we care about a lot of different things, especially about improving the quality of life of our patients, regardless of where they come from and kind of what their background is. But at the same time, from a really blunt standpoint, so what? Why should I care about this project? Why should we consider this project? Tell me why. So give me some background around the situation. Why did you decide to look into this? Why do you think it's something we need to pay attention to? So answer the really blunt question, so what? Okay, once you get that done, then you're going to go into what opportunities this project can address. So the values, and I'm going to go over this in just a second here too, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Make sure that we understand what I'm talking about with this. So the values, you need ideas on each of the 3 main categories. Okay, so 3 main stakeholder groups is what we're looking for here. So there should be at least 3 different values minimum. As you go through this course, you'll start seeing all sorts of different ways to look at value. But initially in here, I'm looking for at least 3 values. Okay. Then also we're going to look at business needs, kind of the different needs of the situation, the needs of the organization. So you're going to go through that. You're going to go through, give me a summary of your key findings. Again, if you did a good job with course 3, homework 3, putting together a summary of the key findings should be a piece of cake, right? You've already got the data there. You might need to update some of your charts and graphs. Pull out a few, put them in, give me a summary in your presentation of what you found. Again, supporting this, answering that real blunt question around, so what? Here's my findings. Again, here's what I'm supporting. So here's how the value, here's what value this is going to bring to the table. Here's how it's addressing some needs of the organization. Here's the data that backs it up. Okay? And then you're going to give me the potential objectives. Okay, so ideas on potential objectives. And again, all of these things, this is the first assignment, first week. You're going to get an opportunity to kind of come back and address these in from a more in-depth aspect as we go through the course. So just give me some initial ideas, and you're going to have one for each of the main types, okay? And there are 4 main types. So I'll show you where that is in the lecture this week. 4 main types. So you need 4 objectives minimum. You can have more, but you need at least 4. Okay, 1 for each of the main types. Then give me some ideas on how could we measure this. Okay, so one thing that people get confused about is objectives versus outcomes. Okay, objectives, because they both, it's not because they both start with O. But anyway, objectives is the goals. Think of objectives as another word for goals for the project. Okay, so what are your goals for this? What do you want to accomplish? Outcome measures is how are we going to know that we met those goals? So outcomes and objectives are not the same thing. A lot of people interchange them, and that is not right. Outcome measures are how are we going to measure, how are we going to know that we achieved our objective, achieved our goal, we met our goal. How are we going to know that? So how can we measure it? And don't worry when you're putting together your ideas on whether or not you know how to measure it at this point. Okay, we're going to cover that in this class. So if it's something that you think a way that would be really awesome way to measure that we met our objective, but you don't know how to measure it, don't panic. Don't worry. We're going to cover all kinds of cool measurement techniques in a few weeks. So that's coming up. So just get some ideas. Really brainstorm. What could we measure? Don't worry about whether or not somebody's already measured it or whether or not you know how to measure it or even if it can be measured. Just give some ideas on what are some ways that we might be able to measure things. Okay? So let's go. I'm going to show you now. We're going to go to lecture really quick so I can show you what we're talking about here. Okay? And I don't know why my PowerPoint's got these weird little background things in it, so sorry about that. Okay, let me get you guys out of the way. Hang on, I got to move my windows around so you can see stuff. Okay, and I'm sorry, I do have the sniffles today, so I'm trying not to be super sniffly in your ears. So if I need to blow my nose, I'm going to put you guys on mute because nobody needs to hear that. Okay, anyways, it's the season for colds. So with this, we're looking at, we talked about over here, right? 3 main categories of value, right? 3 main categories of value. So what are those main categories? And these are going to come up over and over again. So go to page 7 in your lecture notes, right? Page 7. Here we talk about, look, value. Look at that. There's 3 bullets. 3 main categories. You can think of them as stakeholder groups almost. So we need to come up with a value, one value minimum for each of these 3 groups. So think of what would be a value to the veteran. What would be a value to the staff? Staff being not just you, but like kind of staff at large, right, in your organization. What about agency? Okay, agency, think of agency can be either the big VA, central office, national VA, or it could also be the VISN if you're just a location. If you're a clinic, like a CBOC, for example, and the agency might be the VISN. So, and staff can go both ways. Staffing can be staffing at a clinic, staffing can be larger staff at the VISN, staffing can kind of be all over the place. Veteran, pretty self-explanatory, right? We know who they are. So you're going to come up in your presentation, you need to have an idea that is directly tied to each of these 3 groups. So how is your project going to show a value for the veteran? Okay. How is your project going to show value to the staff? How is it going to show value to the agency? Now, a lot of people really get focused on the veteran and the agency are probably, veteran is usually the number 1 that we look for value on. Agency is usually second. Most people forget about the staff. And as all of you know, as staff, right, if you forget about the staff, things can go wrong in a big hurry. So we need to show value to the staff because they're the ones that are going to be boots on the ground. They're going to be the ones implementing this. Okay, so that's why we are really going to, throughout this course, I'm going to come back to this again and again and again. You need to look at the 3 levels, the 3 groups of stakeholders, those 3 main categories, the veteran, the staff, and the agency. Okay, so I need to see 3 value values minimum. You might have, they don't all have to be the same number. So you might have, you need one for each group minimum, but you might have 2 for the veteran, 1 for the staff, 1 for the agency. Totally fine. I just need 3 minimum, 1 for each group. Okay. The second thing that we need to talk about, the next part over here is in terms of opportunities, is we need to look at the needs. Okay. So if you go down to the next page, page 8 in your lecture notes, look at that. We talk about needs next. So we've got value. We also need to know how are we addressing those needs, right? The business needs. So we've got business needs. We've got tangible needs, right? Things we can count, things we can kind of touch, versus intangible. So intangible is patient satisfaction. Anybody who uses Press Ganey, right? A lot of intangibles come up there. The all employee survey, a lot of intangibles come up there. Okay, so things like that. So what are some intangibles? You know, look and feel. Those are things that we might need to address in terms of, like, if we're looking at the waiting room space, for example. The tangible is how long do they have to wait. We can time that. We can measure that. How many people are sitting in the waiting room at any given time? We can measure. We can see that, right? We can look out from the desk and see that. Poke our head out the door. We can see that. But is the waiting room warm and inviting? How are we? That's definitely a business need. We want to have it be warm and inviting. But everybody's got kind of a little bit different idea on that. So that's an intangible. Okay. Don't worry about how you're going to measure these things right now. Just look at how would your project possibly address the business need. Okay. Also look at things like job performance needs. Okay. Sometimes a project isn't going to be necessarily about only the you know, the look and feel of the waiting room, but maybe it's how can we decrease the wait time. Okay, well then we've got, you know, some tangible needs, some intangible needs. Maybe if we make the waiting room a little more comfortable, people won't notice that they're waiting so long. Sometimes that happens. If we've got good magazines, people get, you know, there are perception issue things that can happen with that as well. So also though, what do we possibly look around job performance? Okay, what about learning? Do we have to learn anything new? Do we need new tools? What about preference needs? So think about all these different needs as you're putting together your opportunities. Okay, so business need, we're looking, you know, when you talk about needs, are they intangible or tangible? Okay, is it something around job performance we might be able to address? Is it something around a learning need that we need to address? I know some people in the last iteration of course 3 had talked about, you know, making sure that our providers are up to date on kind of the latest things around in terms of appointments and how do we schedule those, or learning how a lot of you talked about with the Vera assignment, right? How having everybody learn what impact not closing or not coding correctly can have on the financials of the location. So that might be a learning need. Okay, also we're looking at preference needs, okay? So we've got page 8 is the needs, page 7 is your value group, okay? So the other thing I talked about here, again, summary of key findings, straight out of your case study from course 3. Should be straight out of your case study. Again, updating it maybe depending on how old the data is, but generally speaking, straight out of the case study. Then the outcome measures, that was another thing I talked about in terms of, excuse me, not outcome measures, objectives, that was what I was going for, the objectives, your goals. So on page 11 in your lecture notes, we've got 4 types of objectives. So you need, every project should have at least 1 in each of these 4 categories. Okay, and again, don't worry about, you know, whether or not they're not set in stone right now. We're going to come back to this, and you'll have a chance to kind of readdress these again in a few weeks. But right now, think about putting together an objective for one of each of these. You could put it in the form of a SMART statement if you would like. You do not have to. I'm not going to grade you whether or not it's a SMART statement. Some people really like using those because it's easier to kind of think through and see how those are going. But you need to have one objective for each of these 4 types. Okay. And generally speaking, when you're going through your presentation, it's a good idea to kind of label what you're talking about. Okay, so let's start getting, you want to start getting that vocabulary going now, because as we go through the course, it's going to make things easier. Also, as you start presenting things to other people, it's also, again, having this type of vocabulary makes it absolutely clear what you are talking about, what you're conveying, what you are looking at. If you've got an objective and you say, oh yeah, so this I've got some objectives here. I'd like to let's discuss the one around the application and implementation objective. So people know it's an application and implementation objective. Okay, we're going to apply what we've got done thus far, and we're going to look at implementing it. So what is our goal around the applying and implementing what we've done? So think back in course 2, right? We did the one with the lab tests, right? The different ordering of lab tests. What are the best orders to complete the lab testing in, right? So you might have an application and implementation objective around, once the best methodology is determined, to do a phased-in implementation schedule, so that we can. This is a really bad statement, but we're going to phase in the implementation. We want to do a phase-in implementation schedule so that at the end of 1 month, all lab employees are using the same prioritization scheme. Okay, so that one, when you're talking about the application and implementation, people are like, oh yeah, so we're talking about actually applying what we've learned thus far, and how are we going to implement our findings? So we're all on the same page when you use the vocabulary. So there's a reason that I'm bringing up specific vocabulary in this first lecture and in this first assignment, because it's going to benefit you going forward in terms of clarity. It will also help you organize your thoughts a little bit as we're going forward. Okay, and again, with those outcome measures, right, the outcome measures, come up with some ideas. It can be, you really brainstorm. So thinking, about, kind of what, what you're doing with outcome measures, anything those. Okay, so examples for learning. So learning might be an example for an objective for learning is by the end of quarter 1. This is the one for learning how to code, the coding with the physicians, right? So the coding with the physicians might be a learning objective. My brain is getting ahead of my vocal cords here. Okay, so learning objective would be by the end of first quarter, all physicians in the audiology clinic have been to a lunch and learn around around the importance of coding and proper coding and how it affects the funding for our clinic. So that would be an example for learning. Okay, so, and I kind of tried to do some down here, right? So looking at, so that would be learning. And if you look down in your notes section, that should kind of go over them as well. So that would be learning would be, by the end of Q1, all the physicians in audiology have attended a lunch and learn around importance of doing proper coding on our clinic's funding. Okay, also, so reaction might be an example of a reaction objective. Might be, let's see, what can I come up with? Usually I take a little while to think about these, so give me a minute. So in a reaction objective example, we talk about here in the notes, I talk about that they're going to be looking at the relevance, the usefulness, importance, and appropriateness. So you might also have a reaction objective around okay, so reaction objective around the physicians and the coding would be that in the general outpatient clinic, all physicians will understand the, let's see, I'm trying to come up with a way to word it where it doesn't get really long. So in the general outpatient clinic, physicians and staff will understand the impact that that coding has not, incomplete coding has had on our revenue stream for fiscal year 2018. Because that gets at the relevance, right? It also gets at usefulness and why it's important. Does that help, Maria? Hopefully. Or did I just make everybody more confused? Somebody, it's, as always with this, just as in the last one, if I make you more confused, somebody tell me, okay? So, and then with impact ones are usually around, these a lot of times tied to some of your metrics. So the impact objectives a lot of times tie into metrics. So Impact objectives might be decreasing the wait. We want to have a decreased wait time of, by 50% by the end of quarter 2 for fiscal year 19. Or, for example, we want to have an improvement. We want to see an improvement in our Press Ganey scores by, in this particular question, in these questions around ambiance and atmosphere. You can be more specific than that, but that's kind of the idea with impact. A lot of these, a lot of the sale metrics might tie into impact, things like that. Also, reaction ones are really good to tie into the facility metrics and goals as well. So, whoopsies. Sorry, I don't know what just happened. Let's go back here. Where did we go? Here. Yeah, no. Where's my objectives? Hang on. Made me dizzy. Okay, so when you're looking at your objectives, right, there's a lot of different ways you could go. Learning and application and implementation, I will definitely tell you, are the 2 easier of the 4 to come up with. But reaction, think about, how is, when you're putting together reaction objectives, think of how does somebody think about it? How does somebody see this? How, how can we show that it's important? How can we show that it's needed? With the impact, like I said, with that one, that I just said a few minutes ago, that one is going to be more generally tied towards kind of like your metric, achieving your metrics. Maybe we want to move up the quartiles or the quintiles to a higher one. We always want to try to be, first in class in healthcare. But, how can we do some of these? Maybe we've got, the impact might be that we've got no code, less than 1% coding errors in, per month for the next 3 months. Okay, so kind of think about what that word actually means, reaction or impact. Those 2 are definitely a little harder to put together, but that's kind of what I'm looking, what you want to look for. And every project's going to be a little bit different with these. And again, you want to have a minimum of 4. So every project is going to should have, I know up to this point you may not have experienced this, and that's not uncommon. But every project should have reaction, one of each, an objective for each of these. Sometimes you have more than one learning. Sometimes you have more than one application and implementation. So you may end up with something like 7 objectives total, as long as you have at least one minimum for each of the 4 groups. Because when you actually approach it from in this manner, where you've got one of each, these 4 different types of objectives, right? You're really you're looking at it from a really well-rounded point of view. And so one of the things is that we've found is historically people have this kind of one really narrow view of how a project should work, and we know that narrow view does not always result in success. So the idea behind this course is that I'm really trying to set you guys up for having successful projects, so that you are going to be the go-to person. How come your projects always succeed? Because we don't want to waste your time, right? We also don't want to waste money. And those are, regardless of what industry you're in, whether you're public, your private sector, does not make a difference. Those are the 2 things. We don't want to waste time. We don't want to waste money. We want to have the biggest impact, biggest bang for the buck, right? So in doing that, if you look at having your objectives set up like this, you're covering a lot of different areas. If you're looking at addressing the needs, again, from these different points of view, that's really going to go a long ways, especially with the value, okay? When you're looking at our value from our 3 main stakeholder groups here, our customer groups, our veteran, our staff, and our agency, we almost always forget at least one of these 3. Okay? In order to have a well-rounded project, in order to make sure that you've got the best chance of success, and making sure that all the different levels involved are on board with what you're proposing, showing this value is going to make you stand head and shoulders above. Okay, in the next few weeks, we're going to talk a little bit more about value, like really in much more specific, and then we're also going to do a companion, because we've got value, right? And then we've also got risk, which I haven't brought up in this particular lecture, but it's going to come up going forward. So how do you address that before you've actually done anything on the project? Okay, so we're looking at analyzing a project from all these different angles. And a lot of the things that we're going to be covering in the next 8 weeks, well, I guess 7 weeks now, is going to be around kind of broadening your view on what exactly a successful project is. How do you put a successful project together? Those are all key things in terms of getting things done, getting people on board, being a success. Okay, and that's really what the ultimate outcome of this is that not only do you have all of these tools that we've covered in the first 3 courses, but now how do you put that all together and then take it to the next level in terms of actually doing that implementation and application around how do I apply it to a project. So when we look back here, again, you can go ahead with your what to submit list. A lot of people would use this as an outline. You are not required to use this as an outline and have everything in the same order that I've got the bullets. You just need to make sure that you've got each piece in there. Okay, so don't forget the approach, because that's one of the common things that people tend to forget. Tell me, what are you going to do? Okay, so so talk about the approach, talk about the background. Let's talk about those opportunities. Get started on that. And again, don't worry when you're talking about your values and your business needs, or even looking at objectives and the outcome measures. Don't worry that they're not perfect. Okay, we're going to get into this. This is kind of a preliminary, just get you to start thinking about all of these different pieces. And as we go through the course in the next few weeks, we're going to start addressing all of these different components and adding additional components to really give you a robust plan for putting together different projects. Or if you come into a project team that's already going, how do you know whether or not this project has a good chance of success? If you are, going to be on a project team starting up a new project, by the end of this course, you'll know what are the key pieces that we need to have in place, that we need to have thought about in order to have a successful project, so we aren't wasting the time, or we don't end up on one of those never-ending project teams. Has anybody ever been on one of those where the project just goes on and on and on, and then we start out going, this way, and then we start out going, oh, we're going to go over here. Oh, no, our scope broadened. Oh, and the project, it never gets anywhere. And I know, anybody who's been working with the Lean Six Sigma, right, there's a little bit more direction around that. And this course will definitely tie into what you're doing for Lean Six Sigma, but it's going to look at it from a little bit broader point of view. So we're going to pull the lens away a little bit farther, so our focus is going to be a little bit broader than what you're doing with Lean Six Sigma. Great. And that definitely, Lean Six Sigma is hugely important. It's got a lot of benefits. And what we're going to do here, though, is kind of try to broaden your scope out a little bit more. But again, the idea here is we want to put an end to those never-ending project teams. We want to put an end to those projects that don't get anywhere. Or maybe we put them in place, right? And we come back in 6 months to check on them, and everything's reverted to the way it was. Anybody ever seen a project like that? I have many times. So we're going to try to help you get your project set up to avoid being those types of projects. Okay. So what questions do you guys have? Are there any other questions on the lecture at all? Anything in the lecture? Let me just check and see if there's anything more. Okay, so we talked about different kinds of outcomes, why we have things. And then we kind of created the plan here. Okay, and then the other thing I want to remind you is that the assignment is due tomorrow, okay? So the thing you're going to have to pay attention to in course 4, and make sure you are looking at the syllabus as well, is some assignments are due, are 1-week assignments, some are due 2-week assignments. And one thing I will tell you is I tried to set up the schedule such that you should not have to work on an assignment over a school break. So once you are done with the assignment turned in tomorrow, you do not have to think about the course again until the Wednesday after Thanksgiving. So a week from Wednesday. So you can have a full week off. If you want to, I think you might have access to it over the break, which you can most certainly, get started on stuff, but you are not going to have, nothing is going to be actually discussion will be due, any of that kind of stuff. So during the Thanksgiving break, you have 1 week from this Wednesday through the following Tuesday, but you don't have to even look at the website if you don't want to. Okay. Then during the winter break, the college has a 2-week winter break right around the end of December into early January. And same thing there. I've tried to set up the due date for the assignment such that over that winter break, you won't actually have to, again, look at the website if you don't want to. So I tried to get that set up so that it's a little, kind of set up the assignment so that it'll actually give you guys actually get to take a winter break. I've had professors in the past who start assigning more things. They assign extra over the breaks. Well, that's not really fair because they get a break, but then I never did. I didn't get one as a student, and I never liked that. So when I do my classes, I try to set things up so you guys get a break as well, because you guys deserve it. I'm grading the papers and I put together the lectures, but you're doing the legwork on putting together these assignments and projects. So I think that's a fair trade. So the assignment is due tomorrow. The first discussion board is also due tomorrow. So you'll have 2 things due tomorrow, and we'll have, and then again, you have a week off, and then we'll start back again the Wednesday after Thanksgiving. All right. So does anybody have, again, any questions on anything with the PowerPoint at all? Anything with the lecture notes, the lecture? Is this making sense to you, kind of how we're putting this together? And again, this is meant to be preliminary, so we're not going to get into, we're going to get more into value, more into risk, more into business needs, all that kind of stuff going forward, measuring your outcome measures, all that stuff we're going to get into in more in-depth going forward, but just really kind of try to put together a good overview. So any questions on PowerPoint? Okay, we've got about 15 minutes. I do want to go, good question about how long should it be? It kind of depends on the project, which I know sounds like a total, an answer that I'm totally trying to avoid answering your question. But what I would say is kind of a general way to approach it. And this is just, if you think about what way back in course 1 when we talked about what a PowerPoint presentation should look, right? What I like to do personally is I like to kind of put the key piece, like try to stick to 1, maybe 2 key points on each slide. Okay, because that keeps people's interest, and also don't put so much on the slide that the audience is reading it. They should be listening to you, not reading the slide. Okay, so what I would probably say is one way to approach it might be to do a slide for each of the bullets. You might end up, and if you do that, you may end up. I usually recommend put some sort of intro slide on. So when you look at like my lectures and things like that, right, I have an intro slide that says, here's what we're going to talk about. Okay. And then we go through all the details. And then at the end, I would put kind of here's a conclusion, here's what we talked about, and here's what's happening next. So I like to put an intro and a conclusion on there just to kind of bookend it, if you will. And also having a concluding slide gives people a chance to ask questions and that kind of thing. And then I would probably say, once you've got those 2, I like to put, looking at what I've put together here for the what to submit list, I would probably do like a slide on each of these. And then depending on what's up with my key findings, that usually ends up being a couple different slides, because you don't want to put the graphs, if you're using graphs, charts, or tables, right, we don't want to make them tiny. Because has anybody ever, you guys have all been in a presentation, right, where they put like 4 graphs on a page, and you can't, if you're in the back of the room, even if it's a conference room, right, you have no idea what they're doing, what those say. You can't see what the axes say. You can't really tell, like you can sort of see the little lines going up or down or the bars, right, but you don't know what's going on. So I would say, try to use the whole slide space. You've got a whole slide, use it. You don't get extra points for leaving blank space. So use the whole slide. But so this part here usually ends up being a couple of slides, because again, 1, maybe 2 key points on each slide. And then so that would probably give it, so you might end up with, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe let's say 6, 7, 8-ish, 9, 10. So maybe 10 slides in the middle and 1 or 2 on each end. I don't know. Does that sound, does that make sense? And that's just my rule of thumb, is I really want to only have like 1 or 2, maybe 3, depending on kind of what your key points are on a slide. But you really want to kind of, keep it to 1, maybe 1 or 2, possibly 3 main points on each slide. Don't try to squeeze everything in one slide. Okay. There's also, the slides are free, right? So you can make as many as you want. I've been in presentations when I've created presentations, none that you guys have to watch, luckily, that are 100 slides long. So hopefully you guys don't need to do that. So that's what I would say is, kind of look at that. The key rule of thumb when you're, and actually here, this is a good time to kind of go over here. So hang on a second. I'm going to flip over to my Word document. So just one moment, please hold. I get that over here. Okay. Okay. So over here, right? Maybe it'll let me type. Word's been really weird this morning for me. Okay, so when you're doing a presentation, so main thing with a presentation. Okay, this is my number one thing you want to remember with a presentation. One, or well, I guess things you might want to say. Let's say things. Okay, one, tell what you're going to tell. Oops. So tell them what you're going to tell what you're going to tell them. So tell them what you're going to tell them about. Okay, here, we'll do this. Then tell them, so give them the information, and then tell them what you just told them. Okay? So, yeah, so there's, so this is kind of the main thing. Whenever you're doing a presentation, whether or not you've actually got any slides or anything, tell them what you're going to talk about. Okay? Tell them the information, the specifics, and then tell them, recap what you just told them, which sounds totally redundant, but it works. People remember stuff when you do that. And if you look at how I set up my lectures, right, I give you an idea. Here's what we're going to talk about. Here's all the details, and then at the end I summarize again. Okay? So Mike's got a really good idea in terms of, one kind of other rule that you might be able to use in a, in a small presentation as well is, come back here, there we go, is you can do 10 slides, 20 minutes, and 30-point font size. Okay? So that's another one. You can do the 10, 20, 30. So 10 slides, 20 minutes, and then 30-point font. So to give you guys an idea of 30-point font, right? So this right now, what I'm typing, this is 20-point font. Okay? So look at that on your screen and think about how easy that might be to see from, from a room. Okay. Now here is 30-point font. Oops. So can you guys, even just looking at a Word document, right? This is the difference. When you're looking at a screen, now think about looking at your screen from way on the other side of a conference room. It doesn't have to be, even if you're in the office sometimes, I've had a hard time. People type in 12-point font because that's the default. Don't leave it in 12-point font. It's hard to read unless you're sitting there and you yourself have the document just in front of you. Okay, so as an example, like here's 30-point font, right? This is all 12-point font. So if I had a whole presentation of this, you guys are going to be, nobody's going to be paying attention. So use the font. So that's another good rule is 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30-point font. Okay, that's another option. Depends on, the 10 slides is kind of that part, kind of depends on what your topic is. Because I also would say within the 10 slides, if you've got a lot of findings, splitting those findings up into multiple, into multiple slides is always a good idea. So I've been in presentations where you might have 10 slides just on the findings and then another 10 slides on other stuff. Okay, so that might be, so kind of keep that in mind. But like the 20 minutes, 30-point font, that's usually, pretty, that's another way to kind of think about it. So this is an example. Here. Oops. So that's an example. Okay, so let's go back to my normal font size here. Okay, so when we're looking at things, the other thing I wanted to make sure, does everybody remember how to make a PDF in PowerPoint? So the key things you want to remember is, create your PowerPoint. Okay. Here's another trick with PowerPoint, right? Okay, let's see. Hang on, we're going to go back here. I'm going to show you this other thing that's really kind of, a lot of people, it works with Excel too, which doesn't seem, like those two would share much in common. But here's the thing. When you're in PowerPoint, okay, whatever slide you have last selected, or whatever you view you're looking at, when you do file save, it's going to save it as coming up to that. So if I have this as what I'm on when I do my Control S, my save, right, or file save, however you want to do it, this is what's going to come up the next time I open the presentation. So if I'm sending it to somebody or I want somebody else to look at it, they're going to be a little confused because they're in the middle of it. So what I like to do when I save stuff, go back to the beginning, click on the first slide, then do that save, because then it will always open up to this slide. If you are in the slide sorter view, you know, you can kind of do that too. I like to just click up on the top because then it's not saving it down here somewhere. Well, I don't quite understand that. So I always, if you go up to the top and just make sure you're either looking at the first slide or have clicked on the first slide, when you do file save, it will open to that. In Excel, the same thing works with the worksheet tabs, right? Whatever tab you are on and wherever you are in that worksheet is where it's going to open to the next time you open Excel. So if you're saving something and you want somebody else to look at it later, go back to that very first tab, especially if you've got the case study, right, and you've got that little outline that we put together, or if you've got an executive summary. Make sure you click on that and then kind of do that upper, you know, kind of upper left corner up here. If you click on that and you know, select that cell and then do a control save, it's going to open there so everybody can, that you're at the beginning. Okay, so that's something that, especially when you get super complicated spreadsheets or super complicated presentations, having it, you know, starting at the beginning every time just helps you figure out where you're at instead of spending 10 minutes going, what was I looking at? Like, where am I? So that just as a general rule of thumb, that's something that a lot of people don't realize. But if you do that, it will make your life so much easier. Okay, so back over here to create your PowerPoint and save it. Okay, so we don't lose it. Okay, then what you're going to do is when you do, you can do file print and you can print it to a PDF, or you can do like save as PDF. So either do you print, oops. Okay, so as PDF, or you can do save as and then choose PDF. Okay, and whatever you do, when you do those, here's the key piece with this, right? Is when you print it as a PDF or you save it as a PDF, there is a little button, the options button. Okay, so you want the options button. Oops. So click on the options button, and then there's a little section that says publish what. Okay, the default is slides, just like print. It's like print what, okay? Print default is print to slides. Default is publish to slides, okay? Or you might, so I might say here, we'll do it this way. So we're in the same order here. Okay, so print what or publish what, okay? And you want to choose notes. Okay, so choose the notes pages. Okay, so choose notes pages. Once you do that, then click OK, and then you're on your merry way. Oops, not one. And just print it or save it or whatever you want to do with it, okay? But just make sure that you do this part right here, okay? Do that little section in the middle because that way you will get your notes pages, okay? So does that make sense? That's one of the things that I want to make sure that I cover because invariably somebody isn't quite sure how to do that. So any additional questions? Any questions? We got about 5 minutes left. Hopefully this is helping, you know, a little bit. So let's see. Actually, before I do change them, any questions on the lecture notes at all? Any last questions on it? Okay, everybody understood? Stand your value, page 7, your needs, page 8, objectives, excuse me, are page 11. Okay. So, and again, you know, with all of these pieces, just remember this is the preliminary version. We're going to come back to this. We're actually going to come back to this particular assignment again. We're going to come back to this project again in the course in another assignment. So you will have an opportunity to kind of flesh it out a little bit more. So in this, when you're putting these things together, the summary should be pretty solid. Okay, we've done that. That's not going to change a lot. And kind of these first 2 bullets here. What your project question is, here, we'll get some of the clutter out of here for you guys. Hang on. Okay, so you've got, what your project question is. That should be pretty, again, reuse that from before. Your background should be pretty key. The project approach, just make your best guess. What do you think would be good? You'll be able to update it later. Okay, so just kind of make your best guess. Same thing with your opportunities. these other pieces, the opportunities, the objectives, and the outcome measures, just really make your best guess. Okay, and see where that's at. We will come, so I'm not going to grade you on whether or not they're accomplishable. Okay, what I'm going to grade you on with the assignment is how well are you explaining it, and does it make sense? Okay, so how, did you do a good job of explaining it, and then does it make sense? Because the idea here is you're kind of, in this particular assignment, you're kind of wanting to try to, sell your project, for lack of a better descriptor, right? You're trying to sell it. You want to have the, you want Alex here, our customer, our little man Alex here, you want him to pick your project and give you the resources to deal with this. Okay, so you're going to try to sell it in the presentation with the idea that you're going to be able to flesh out details and things, going forward. So, any other questions? Any last questions for anybody at all? No? Yes? Again, hopefully this has been pretty helpful. Okay, if you guys don't have any last questions, okay, if you guys don't have any last questions, I will let you guys go. You might get an extra couple of minutes to work on your assignment, or do whatever you need. I will look forward to kind of seeing what you've got. They're due at midnight Central Time tomorrow night. Okay, so I won't be looking at them. I'll be downloading them until Wednesday morning. Okay. Also, remember your discussion is due tomorrow. And then I hope that everybody has a happy Thanksgiving and has an enjoyable break, at least from class. Don't know if you'll have a break from work. That's, unfortunately, that part's not up to me. But at least you'll have a break from class. And we will see you back again at the after the Thanksgiving holiday. So enjoy your weekend. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And thanks for attending this morning.